Today we have the poem Frost at Midnight by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. When you say the very word Coleridge, the first five words that would come to your mind is definitely imagination, symbolism, romanticism, nature, supernatural, and many more. And I would like you to write in the comments what are all the words that come to you when I say Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So, this is one of his long, amazingly coherent artistic creations. Frost at Midnight. Here in this poem, we can see that Coleridge is taking us into a yet again the very start of the poem reminds us of Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey. There is a Wordsworthian worship of nature we can see here. Coleridge is also a poet who gave a great deal of importance to nature, just like all the other romantics. In this poem, we see that Coleridge is celebrating the birth of his son, Hartley Coleridge. The year is 1798, and the premise is that Coleridge is sitting in his house. There is frost and there is snow outside. He is sitting beside his sleeping infant. There is nobody else there. And the poet is looking out. He is looking at the snow and the frost. And on that cold, wintry night, we see how he is communing, he is communicating with nature. For me, the most fascinating thing about this poem is its imagery. Its imagery is so rich that the moment you start reading this work, you feel like you are in that fairy land. You are in that land, surrounded by frost and snow. When we are perhaps when you're studying or maybe supposed to do a difficult task given at school, you start daydreaming. And in your daydreams, I personally remember that I would choose these beautiful lands and I would see myself on those lovely mountains full of flowers or snow. I have never seen snow so far in my life. Yet I would think that I would love to be in such a land. And you know how you slowly get transported, and then your mother's voice, or your teacher's voice, or your companion beside you calls you, and you find it is hard to come back to this world because you are so much in your daydreams. So I would say that this poem is like a daydream. It's like you are going with a poet into that land. So let's see the imagery. First of all, you have to remember is the visual and auditory imagery of this poem is unparalleled. So let's see. The frost performs its ministry. So the very line, the frost performs its secret ministry. The very tune of it gives you that. Mostly it is blank verse with iambic pentameter. So, unhelped by any wind, the owlet's cry came loud and hark again, loud as before. The inmates of my cottage, all at rest, have left me to that solitude which suits Abstruser musings, save that at my side. So here he says that the frost is performing its secret ministry. The very word secret, the starting, when you say secret, you are thinking of something isolated, something mysterious, something obscure, unknown, where no other person knows what is happening. There is so much of mystery right at the beginning of this poem. And ministry is the vocation of a minister. And the frost is performing, the snow, the frost is performing this holy, sacred job, this ministry. And he says the baby owlet is crying yet again. These are auditory imagery. So you reach a night, a frosty night. The baby owl is crying out, making a noise yet again. But save that, there is no other noise. There is no sound at all. The inmates of my cottage, the people who dwell with me, the people who live with me, my family, everybody is out, nobody is there here around me. I sit in solitude, yet another word to match the secret. Abstruser musings. Abstruser is difficult, hard to comprehend. He's getting those kind of thoughts, difficult thoughts are coming into the poet's mind. And this solitude, he says, suits me because I can, let my mind wander into these uncomprehendable, unfathomable thoughts. My cradled infant slumbers peacefully. 'Tis calm indeed, so calm that it disturbs and vexes meditation with its strange and extreme stillness. It is so calm, so still that even meditation is vexed. That is, sometimes there are those nights that are so quiet that you are peaceful when the night is quiet, but it becomes so still and so quiet that you become uneasy. The stillness is too much. So the poet is now becoming almost uneasy. Meditation is not possible. It is vexing his meditation. The silence is troubling his meditation. There is extreme stillness. So all these words convey to us. See how powerfully Coleridge makes us feel that we are sitting in an isolated corner of the world where there are no human beings at all. Sea, hill, and wood. This populous village, on one side, this populous village with all the people in it. And then there is the sea, the hill, the wood. Now, here Coleridge brings the natural and man made. He is bringing nature into our life. With all the numberless goings on of life, there are the numberless goings on of life. Yet another device you have to notice is this poem uses very highly idiomatic language. To say the goings on of life is like the everyday occurrences. All those people around, they're sleeping, they're putting their babies to bed, somebody is giving dinner in the cottage next door. So all these goings on of life is happening in this populous village. But yet at the same time, our poet is vexed by the quietness. He is feeling himself amidst nature and he is looking through his window. He can see the mountain, the sea, the wood, the greenery. All of it is, presenting themselves to him. With all the numberless goings on of life, inaudible as dreams, the thin blue flame lies on my low burnt fire and quivers not. Only that film which fluttered on the grate. The only thing that seems to be moving, other than the uneasy mind of our poet, is the thin blue flame. There is a fire that is lighted up in that room to make it warm for the poet and his infant. And there is that thin blue flame remaining, which is so, which is the, it itself is still, but that slight movement. He says that, all things around him are as inaudible as human dreams. And yet this thin blue flame, it is lying on the low burnt fire. And he is looking at it fluttering on the grate. The use of words like thin blue flame, these are small monosyllabic words, but to put it together in that poetic manner, thin blue flame, it is something so romantic, a style of romanticism which instantly reminds us of Wordsworth's One Green Hue in Tintern Abbey. These three monosyllabic words are so impactful when you say one green hue or thin blue flame, almost personifying it and putting it there in front of you. Still flutters there the soul unquiet thing, methinks its motion in this hush of nature gives it dim sympathies with me who live, making it a companionable form, The poet is now, his imagination is coming up, his rich imagination. He says that I feel that in the hush of nature, this little film, this flame, it has sympathies with me. It sympathizes with my thoughts. This little flutter on my grate sympathizes with my thoughts, my uneasy thoughts. We can see that there are anxious thoughts, there are uneasy thoughts, there are deep reflections, there is introspection going on here. Make it a companionable form whose puny flaps and freaks the idling spirit. So my idling spirit, my thoughts that are going, rather wayward too, reflecting on all sorts of unfathomable thoughts and questions. This flame seems to be sympathizing with me. It seems to me to be my companion in this night. By its own moods interprets everywhere echo or mirror, seeking of itself and makes a toy of thought. This flame seems to, look back at me, sympathize with me, becoming my companion in this night. And, it is moods are interpreted and it seems to be echoing or mirroring my own thoughts. Now, another important point that you need to note as a student is this is a conversational poem. And Coleridge started the conversational poems where it is like, he is speaking to someone. The reader is listening to his conversation, or it could be the infant is speaking, is listening to his conversation, or it could be the poet speaking to himself. So this is Coleridge actually gave out several short conversational poems, but this particular one is one of his long conversational poems. Samuel Taylor Coleridge was the 10th child of his parents, and he was born in Ottery, St. Mary. He was raised in a small town, and till the age of 13 or 14, his father was there. And after that, his father passed away. And in his childhood, he writes that the moments that he enjoyed the most were when he went with his father on church duties, on the duties in the parish. And these seem to be the only moments of this little child that he could share with his father. And most of his childhood, since he lived in a town, he was not able to communicate with nature or be free and run around in nature. He was in a boarding school, and where he says that my companions were all books. And being a serious boy, he did not join sports, or it is said that he did not have too many companions. Most of his companions were his own older brothers and the few neighbors. And he writes that I was of a serious turn of mind. By the age of 6, he had finished rereading Robinson Crusoe, and soon by the age of 10 had finished other masters. So we can see that this child would have grown up, contemplating, having serious thoughts. So this is the next paragraph is going into Coleridge's own childhood. But oh, how oft at school, with most believing mind, presageful, have I gazed upon the bars to watch that fluttering stranger, and as oft with unclosed lids, already had I dreamt of my sweet birthplace and the old church tower. So he says, how often at school, with the most believing mind, my innocent mind had looked at this very fire, this very flame of imagination, and how often had I felt presageful. The word presageful means to have a presentiment or to have an intuition of what is going to happen. So this child was sitting at his desk and he was imagining that this is not the truth that I am seeking, but it is going to come in my life. He is presageful at his school desk. He's watching that stranger, that flame of fire. And the flame here, Coleridge was a believer in he was a believer in the Trinity of the Holy Ghost, the Son, and the Father. So there is a very high element of Catholicism also here. The flame in the grate, or the flame on the candle, or the flame of light in the schoolroom, all denote the light of God. The very candlelight in Catholic religion is reminiscent of God's light of knowledge. So he says, I was thinking of that old church tower, my sweet birthplace. The old church tower, whose bells the poor man's only music rang from morn to evening, all the hot fair day. So that church bells that rang, that was the only music for the poor man. He had no other entertainment. There was no other music in his poor home where he was toiling, where Coleridge would, as the 10th child of a mother, of a lady who had lost her husband and would have seen so much of toiling as his older brothers would have raised the younger ones. And in that toil, the church bells, which probably reminded him of his father with his parish duties, would have been the only music. And for the poor people around him too. It is said that he learned in a school which was a school that gave scholarships to the poor children. It was a school run mainly to educate those people who were not able to pay the whole fees, as well as orphans and children from poor families. So sweetly that they stirred and haunted me with a wild pleasure, falling on mine ear, most like articulate sounds of things to come. Those church bells, are those little moments in his childhood, were like a presageful presentiment, an intuition of what is to come later. He was going to be a seeker. That is for sure. He is a seeker, and he was seeking at that time. He got the Bible. I would say that Coleridge got the Bible at a very young age, but his second Bible was for his mature age. And his second Bible, I believe, is nature. We could call nature to be his second Bible. And so gazed I till the soothing things I dreamt lulled me to sleep, and sleep prolonged my dreams, and so I brooded all the following morn. So this very thoughtful, very contemplative child would fall asleep almost in his class. He would be so into his daydream that he was almost sleeping in class. And so he was brooding on all these thoughts, awed by the stern preceptor's face, mine eye. And suddenly he would be awed by the preceptor's face. Preceptor is a tutor or teacher of that period. And that preceptor, the tutor, would be very strictly looking, talking, and this child would be awed and wakened from that daydream. Fixed with mock study on my swimming book, save if the door half opened and I snatched a hasty glance, and still my heart leaped up. This boy would be fixed with mock study. Mock study is pretend study. He would be pretending to study. Looking at his textbook, he's pretending to study because he does not want that preceptor, that strict tutor or teacher to shout at him. And even so, we would see that his mind was constantly wandering into these reflections. And a hasty glance, and still my heart leaped up. And even amidst his mock studying, that one glance, one flame of fancy, or that thought that wakened him, would immediately make his heart leap up. And when we say, my heart leaped up, I am reminded of the poem, My Heart Leaped Up as I Behold a Rainbow in the Sky by William Wordsworth. So we can see that the romantics, especially William Wordsworth and Coleridge, they were building a lexicon of their own. They were making almost a language of their own, writing the Biographia Literaria together. And this poem, since Frost at Midnight was written before my heart leaped up. That I I feel that their words or these lexicon was becoming an echo. Each one was echoing the other, and these two were definitely the supreme masters of romanticism. So my heart leaped up, for still I hope to see the stranger's face. So I was suddenly hoping to see someone, townsman or aunt or sister most beloved, my playmate when we both were clothed alike. I was waiting for something always. I was looking for an answer. I was waiting for a person. Could it be my playmate from my childhood, when, or my sister, my little sister? It could be a girl next door or a cousin, or somebody whom he addresses as sister. And there they go back to the time when both were dressed alike, when both were in their long dresses, which means they were playmates as babies. So could it be that, his heart was always, even in that classroom, looking for a diversion, looking for an answer? And suddenly we see Coleridge turning to the baby sleeping next to him. And now the conversational poem is moving to this infant sleeping next to him. Dear babe, that cradlest, that sleepest cradled by my side, whose gentle breathings heard in this deep calm fill up the interspersed vacancies and momentary pauses of the thought. My babe, so beautiful, it thrills my heart. So here it is. We see that Coleridge is looking at his baby, and this baby is slumbering, and only the breath of that baby is audible in that room. And he says that your gentle breathing is the only interruption. The word interspersed means, like there are intervals in his thought process, in his reflections, and that intervals are filled up with this baby's breathing. And he says, my beautiful, brilliant son, Hartley Coleridge, is being welcomed into this world. He says, my beautiful baby. And this image cannot but remind us of that silent, holy night where the Virgin sat with her baby Jesus. And because Coleridge would definitely be influenced by his own childhood, there was a period in his life when he went into a pantheistic, pagan notions where he worshipped nature, which continued to the end of his life. Yet at the same time, we see that towards the end of his life, he goes back into the Catholicism, more into the Trinitarian philosophy, and the very Catholic essence. But he also felt throughout that the creation of God, nature, was an all consciousness in which God revealed himself to man. To be one with nature was to be one with God. And that holy night also we are reminded here. With tender gladness thus to look at thee, and think that thou shalt learn far other lore, and in far other scenes. For I was reared in the great city, amidst cloisters dim, and saw not lovely but the sky and stars. And now he makes a promise to his little child. He says, with gladness, I will tell you, my sweet child, you will not have the same childhood that I had. I want you to have a childhood in which you are one with nature, just as so many parents would want their children to have a better childhood than they themselves had. We all, as adults, we want to erase those hardships of our childhood, and we want to present. If it is a student who is listening, you, a student, must know that your parent wants to give you a better childhood than they themselves had. And Coleridge says, I was amidst the town, I was in cloistered, I did not see nature as I grew up. I was not running on the streets amidst wild trees, maybe gathering berries. And this childhood, we know another poet who had precisely this childhood, and that is William Wordsworth. And Coleridge, when he listened to the childhood of his friend who in Tintin Abbey says, as a babe, as a boy, as a young man, I ran and played like a deer. I played like a wild animal. My nurse, my guardian, my love, my muse is nature. Wordsworth had the benefit of having nature right from a very early age, that he says that I know how the grass felt on my feet even as a little baby. But here Coleridge did not have that fortune, and he says, I want you, my child, to have it. You will learn other lore. Lore is stories. I learned the stories of books and education from the schools. I learned in the church and in the schoolroom and in the grammar classes. But you, my child, will roam in these woods and play in these streams, and you will have such a childhood which is going to be so beautiful that you will be one with nature. You will feel the consciousness of God. But thou, my babe, shall wander like a breeze. You will wander like a breeze by lakes and sandy shores, beneath the crags of ancient mountain and beneath the clouds, which image in their bulk both lakes and shores and mountain crags. So shalt thou see and hear the lovely shapes and sounds intelligible of that eternal language which thy God utters, who from eternity doth teach himself in all and all things in himself. Great universal teacher, he shall mold thy spirit and by giving make it ask. So he says that you, my dear child, and see how rich is this imagery. This is a poem where you definitely have to mention the imagery of the mountains, the lakes, the shores, the woods, the mountain crags. And he says that you will see all this. And in the creation, you will see the creator. And that eternal language of nature, you will see the eternal language of God, because God speaks to his creation, to mankind through his creation, that is nature. He reveals himself in all. He is in everything. The godly spirit is in all creation. And you will communicate like Wordsworth's little child who, when she plays in the stream, the poet says, is praying more than any devoted man. This little girl who plays in the stream is already communicating with God. And the great universal teacher, God manifested in nature, will give you, and by giving, make it ask. That is a very beautiful line here. Nature and this universal spirit will give you so much of beauty, of imagination, of love, of thoughts, and by giving will make you ask. It is this nature that makes us ask questions to the world around us, and to ask questions about the majesty of God, of the majesty of creation, of the need to be kind, of the need to be kind to other human beings. The revolt in a Shelley, or the worship of beauty in a Keats, or Coleridge's appeal to the supernatural, or Wordsworth, or Sade's desire for a utopian world, all these questions are coming from nature. It is nature that is making these lake poets, these romantics, ask these questions. And Coleridge tells his son, you too, by receiving, will start asking and thereby giving back to the world that you have been born in. So the word God is also is very important here, because none of the other romantics usually use the word God. We will never see God in Shelley's writing, because he was pantheistic and to an extent sometimes even atheistic. And Keats too quite carefully avoided the word God. Even if they used words like providence or other synonyms of God, the word God in itself as the Christian God is never used. But Coleridge seems to bring about a blending of the Trinitarian God with the universal providence as well as nature. So that is a point that is different. And another significant point that we have to remember is these words are the words, the idioms, all seem to be echoed in the later romantic poets. So we can say that he greatly influenced the later romantic poets by this one poem, Frost at Midnight. Some of his important poems are Kubla Khan, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Christabel. So there are a great many famous works of Coleridge, and his literary philosophy is seen in the Biographia Literaria. Coming to our poem, therefore all seasons shall be sweet to thee, whether the summer clothe the general earth with greenness, or the redbreast sit and sing between the tufts of snow on the bare branch of mossy apple tree, while the night thatch smokes in the sun thaw, whither the eve drops fall. So all the seasons shall be sweet to you because you will learn to live with the seasons, to know that this is summer and this is autumn. And like Keats sings, the songs of summer are sweet, but sweeter still are those of autumn. And the frost of winter is beautiful because in all these cyclic seasons, there is the bliss and the love and the knowledge of God coming through, of nature becoming one with man. So there is divinity, the consciousness of divinity all around. So here the poet says that in all of nature, in every season, you will derive comfort. You, my child, who are going to grow up alongside nature. And the word, the eavesdrops fall. This is again, this line, this idiomatic line is used in Keats' Nightingale. So many phrases you will see again coming in the later poems. Heard only in the trances of the blast, or if the secret ministry of frost shall hang them up in silent icicles. So these are all heard only in the blast. Now he's again coming back to the present. The secret ministry of this divinity of nature, it is heard in the frost, it shall hang up in the silent icicles, quietly shining to the quiet moon. So quietly and quiet are used, both have the same root word. So to use the same word, it would be called polypteton. That is the device used here. Polypteton is quietly and quiet, like strength and strong, words like that with the same root being used for poetic language. Now, another word that I wanted to tell you is the very first line is of very significant because the poet says the frost performs. To perform, performs is a present tense verb. So that is how the poet makes the whole thing in a present tense so that we are with the poet. This is not something that happened before, but we are sitting with him and being in the present. And it is only when he talks about his school time that we go to the past. And yet again, when he says, my baby is breathing, slumbering here, we are again pulled back into the present. So the present tense is quite important. Then another word which seems to be his own style is silentness. Usually we would say silence or silent. We don't say silentness. But silentness is rather an unnatural expression which would make us feel it is almost eerie silent. Then, what I find most significant about this poem is that there is a cyclical style of this poem in which the starting we see in the silence is uneasiness. Uneasiness becomes reflection. Reflection becomes unfathomable thought. And from unfathomable thought, he goes into introspection as well as thoughts about the universe in general. And it is all ending from reflection and apprehension. It is going into benediction. I feel it is ending like a blessing. He is blessing that little child, saying that I will aid you in getting that beautiful childhood which I wished I myself had got. And I will let you see divinity in nature. So it is, his thoughts are being quietened From uneasy quiet, we are going into an easy, restful, beautiful quietness.